People are trying to tell us something without telling us something.
Right.
This is the true story of UFOs, of what's been going on.
The founding fathers, quote unquote, of our country, like Benjamin Franklin, did you know that they were actually part of a Mason lodge that was a Muse lodge?
And so Tom is saying, what do we know about Prometheus?
Giants are in every culture's history.
But that's a real newspaper clipping that says 49 skeletons found.
The way it's explained to me is that they are gods, with the little g.
Let's take it easy. Let's go. Prometheus was this guy who stole fire from the gods, right? For the humans, he was giving fire to the humans.
Which is Swayabharu, Asura, who got his head cut off for stealing the nectar of the gods.
Establish direct communication with a non-human intelligence, and that you believe this information to be true.
Yes. Yes.
Sandals that are like size 29, and these giant clothes. Like, I'm not making this part up. You can go see this.
How much do you know about Greek mythology? It's like, whoa.
Who said that?
I can't say.
Including Nephilim, actual giants have been reported to me that live down there. Whole civilizations, corporations. I mean, it's unbelievable.
The ultimate goal of the Watchers, which is played out in what they actually do, is to dominate the earth. They set up these dynasties.
Now that gives the show away.
A lot of activity in the atmosphere. There is an underground kingdom.
So do you think that we're living in some sort of lower prison planet and, our senses are all there to sort of mislead us and we need to somehow escape in some sort of disembodied way? Or what's your sort of, take on that?
You're talking about Fight Club again.
The end of one of Tom DeLonge's book, actually, he makes a reference to the gods are still with us. The Greek gods are still with us, which I didn't know about, actually, until about 2 weeks ago.
Like you've got like a series based on your book about UFOs, and then now there's like a subsequent series to that.
Yeah, so Legendary picked up my book. It's called Secret Machines. It's like these 700-page novels that are about UFOs, story about UFOs, but it's all government. It's all like military-industrial complex. Think like Area 51, CIA, Department of Defense, and then their counterparts in other countries. And then intermixed with that is some of the things flying around are totally different entirely, and so it's a big deal because this is the true story of UFOs, of what's been going on with our government and everything else. So
Tom is sending me these long emails that he's getting, right? And he's saying, what the hell do you make of this? Right? People are trying to tell us something without telling us something.
Right.
It's like follow the money, right?
Yeah.
They're giving us hints of where we should go on this. And we have to pay attention to what they're not telling us and what they're telling us. And this came across because at one point, somebody sent us this long email. One of his most trusted advisors said, have you really looked, how much do you know about Greek mythology? It's like, whoa.
Who said that?
I can't say.
Okay.
So he came out and said that. It was a he. He came out and said, do that, right? And it's specifically talking about Prometheus. Now that gives the show away, right? If we take the Prometheus story as an encrypted story of what actually happened, we're getting close. And I think that is what it is. There, at some point, somebody did something they weren't supposed to do. And it might have jump-started civilization on this planet, right? It might have been that. But Prometheus suddenly became the thing. And so Tom is saying, what the fuck do we know about Prometheus? And so I'm saying, let's take it easy. Let's go. Prometheus was this guy who stole fire from the gods, right? For the humans, he was giving fire to the humans. Humans didn't have fire. They were freezing their asses off. Prometheus came down and said, here's fire, get warm, And the gods didn't like that. So they punished Prometheus. You're going to get chained to a rock, You're going to be punished for the rest of your existence for this thing. So I said, let's go back and look at this. This is what they're trying to tell. They're trying to tell us something. And what is Prometheus about? It's about contact between the humans and the gods. And the one who made the contact was a god, not one of the humans.
That's right. And it was a god who was transgressing on behalf of humans against the gods themselves, sort of a rebel,
right?
Sleeper cell god.
Yeah. which the Gnostics believed was the serpent in the Garden of Eden, that the serpent was God, that the God that we know of from the Bible was the imposter, the interloper, the guy who was not really God.
So I got breakfast with Tom DeLonge once, who I love, by the way. I think
He's a great guy.
He's the best.
Yeah.
And he actually referenced Gnostic thought at the time. He was talking about the archons, who were considered kind of almost imprisoners of the kind of lower material world and like Gnostic ideology. And you hear Gnostic thought, run across a lot of ufology. Like it seems like Jacques Vallée is roughly kind of Gnostic in his orientation. So do you think that we're living in some sort of lower prison planet and, our senses are all there to sort of mislead us and we need to somehow escape in some sort of disembodied way? Or what's your sort of, take on that?
You're talking about Fight Club again. You're talking about Fight Club again.
All right, let's talk about some of the stuff you were told that you can share. The biggest question, who are they? I mean, I think I said in the introduction that some people in your group refer to them not as aliens or the visitors, they refer to them as the others. Is there significance in using that term?
I don't know the significance of the others. The phenomenon is not used. Aliens is not used. It's the others. And when you're taught, the way it's explained to me is that they are gods, with the little g. So the entire UFO phenomenon is about multiple gods that fight amongst themselves and by design factionalize mankind into different religions to step back and let us fight each other so it has other things that it wants to accomplish. And we don't notice them because we're too involved fighting each other. So, and they know that. So our government knows that. Our government knows that the others are instigating war amongst mankind. But the other issue is that these gods from you got to look back at ancient history and all those stories about gods that came down and did this and that. It's all true. So that's the other thing. You got to, and I'll get into that in the docuseries. There's some of that stuff I don't want to get into tonight, but the government is very aware that this intelligence is pitting different countries against each other based on religion, on purpose.
Makes a reference to the gods are still with us. The Greek gods are still with us, which I didn't know about actually until about 2 weeks ago, and it was really interesting to hear. Because I had just given a talk that I didn't want recorded. I went to New York City and I was giving a talk, and the name of the talk was "The Muse is Real." Okay, I went from the very first idea of muses, thousands of years ago for the Greeks, and then how they kind of they never really go away. So even the founding fathers, quote unquote, of our country, like Benjamin Franklin, did you know that they were actually part of a Mason lodge that was a Muse lodge?
Here I come. Oh, here I come. Oh.
So even the founding fathers, quote unquote, of our country, like Benjamin Franklin, did you know that they were actually part of a Mason lodge that was a Muse lodge? It was dedicated. Yes.
I knew he was a Freemason. I didn't know he was part of a Muse lodge.
It was like the Seven Sisters. Wow. It was a French Muse lodge.
Talk about a guy with a million ideas. He invented the bifocals, a certain type of harpsichord. Famously was involved in electricity experiment. He was a complete polymath, and so was probably tapped into all sorts of ideas.
Isn't that interesting?
According to occult records, a character named Sanat Kumara rules over the world from inside the earth, along with a group known as the Great White Brotherhood, 7 in total. Helena Blavatsky says these 7 Kumaras are the same as the 7 Dhyanis, the 7 Archangels, and the 7 Elohim, the 7 representing the 7 sisters, also known as the Pleiades star cluster.
So who is pumping these ideas through these architects?
The religious control system on the planet.
And so what is that?
1917 and the experience of Fatima, where most people they portrayed it as a cultural or religious event, and you looked at it, from the observations scientifically.
Fatima is very deep, both in terms of testimony. I mean, there were 80,000 people there, on the last apparition. They didn't see the Virgin. They saw a disc, a silver thing between them and the sun. But what they described to me is a very sophisticated process by which we may be able to interact with the entities.
But so you're saying you've been made aware that there is a government project, maybe it was 20 years ago, that was able to establish direct communication with a non-human intelligence, and that you believe this information to be true, and that this is a reality. This is what you understand to be true. Is that correct?
I cannot tell. Yes. It's factual.
Let's not scare the bejesus out of the listeners right off the bat, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, if you spend, any serious time looking into the UFO phenomenon, and by the way, it's something I've studied for 25 years or something like that. I touched on it toward the end of Prometheus and Atlas, which was published in 2016. It was my dissertation in 2012 and then was adapted into a book 2016. And then I wrote Closer Encounters, my study of the UFO phenomenon. Closer Encounters was published in 2021. But it's the outcome of like 20 years of preceding research. So anyone who goes into the UFO phenomenon, with even, half of that depth and endurance of research, inevitably realizes that whether you want to work through what Jacques Vallée's uncovered, or whether you want to at least look at Zecharia Sitchin's research, the UFO phenomenon extends through all of recorded human history and most likely into prehistory, and it's absolutely inseparable from both revealed religious systems like Judeo-Christianity and Islam, and also more archaic, how could we put it? Let's just say archaic polytheistic ritualistic religions, like the religion of ancient Egypt, or, the Vedic religion, and so on and so forth. It's very clear that, in the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, the Devas and the Asuras, or what in the Greek language we might call the gods and the titans, are exactly the same beings as, the Elohim in the Bible, or the rebel angels, the Nephilim in the biblical context. They're the same beings as the Anunnaki in Sumerian scriptures, where again you have two factions. This idea that there are two factions runs through every human religious belief system on the planet throughout the course of history.
Would you say Prometheus is an archetype of this rebel angel?
Absolutely. So, there's a through line from Enki in the Sumerian myths, to Prometheus in the Greek context, to Quetzalcoatl in the Mayan context, to, let's say, a leader of the Asuras in a Hindu context.
Which is Swaibharu, the Asura who got his head cut off for stealing the nectar of the gods. And, you can't blame him, man. You gotta share a little bit of love, You gotta share a little bit of elixir with everybody. You can't just have it for yourself.
Sort of demigod figure that transgresses on behalf of man against the gods, brings forth some sort of sacred technology to them.
Exactly. And in a Judeo-Christian context, of course, this is Lucifer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
But I do know, I know certain things about each of the kingdoms.
Can we touch that real fast?
All right. So we'll just do a deep dive.
Great.
Number one, you talk about the devil being the prince of the power of the air. There's definitely an air kingdom. A lot of activity in the atmosphere. There is an underground kingdom. There's all kinds of activity going on underground. We talked a little bit about this last time, but you do have certain groups, including like reptilians. You have bases that are definitely have other life forms in it.
This isn't magic. It's biology. We are able to use telepathy and telekinesis from our birth. The structure of our brain is a little bit different and more active than yours, especially when we are in sunlight. When we are on the surface and we meet human beings, we are able to touch their mind and induce them via telepathy the command, "See us as one of your kind," and the weak human mind will accept this order without refusing.
It is bizarre. What is the obsession with reptilians in India? There's a lot of people worshiping reptiles there, huh?
Yep.
The reptiloid life form stays in caves or caverns that aren't very deep. They prefer the desert mountains. They use camouflage rather than fighting, but they do carry vril rods for protection. They do have a symbol, not the hokey snake with wings that I keep seeing in the public. The reptoids use a dragon with its tail in its mouth with 7 pointed stars in the middle.
You do have the kingdom that goes deeper than that in the hollow earth. This includes all kinds of activity, including Nephilim. Actual giants have been reported to me that live down there. Whole civilizations, corporations. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Genesis chapter 6, verses 1 through 5, you'll encounter let's say an odd passage. When people began to multiply on the face of the ground, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that they were fair, and they took wives for themselves of all that they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans, who bore children to them. These were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown. What's going on here?
Take wives from among the daughters of men, produce children, families, and then this is the unspoken motive, create dynasties and dominate the earth through their offspring. So they had to this had to be a legal transaction with the children of men. And when they made that transaction, obviously it was a Faustian bargain, but it was legal, it was authorized by the governors of planet Earth, namely the offspring of Adam and Eve. And they struck a bargain. Clearly, in the Book of Enoch, they because it's not one-sided. The Watchers get to marry the maidens that they chose, but in exchange, they gave knowledge to men. So there's a bargain that took place there. And then the ultimate goal of the Watchers, which is played out in what they actually do, is to dominate the earth. They set up these dynasties, and their offspring can rule the earth because they're human enough to inherit the birthright of Adam, which is dominion of planet Earth. But the Watchers themselves, their governance of the earth is through their offspring, through their human hybrid offspring. So they're trying to play a legal game here.
Questioner, I am interested as to how the first distortion applies to the negatively polarized entity misplacing the mind, body, spirit complex. Why is the negatively polarized entity followed to the place of negative time-space? Why would one of us freely follow the entity? Answer, I am Ra. The positive polarity sees love in all things. The negative polarity is clever. Question 68.18. Questioner, then I am assuming if the negative polarity used any other approach that did not use the free will of the other self, he would lose polarization and magical power. This is correct, isn't it? Answer, I am Ra. This is correct. The free will of the instrument is indeed a necessary part of the opportunity afforded the Orion group. However, this free will and the first distortion applies only to the instrument. The entire hope of the Orion group is to infringe upon free will without losing polarity. Thus this group, if represented by a wise entity, attempts to be clever.
Let's dive into the giants.
Giants are fun. And where do you want to start? The beginning?
Yeah.
Giants are in every culture's history. And every culture has giants. Whenever I see that, a lot of what I do is just pattern recognition. Like I wasn't even really a flood myth guy until I started doing my show. And it's like, this flood story keeps showing up over and over, no matter what I'm talking about. The flood myth shows up, and it's always showing up at the same time as like the end of the Younger Dryas, like these things. It's just the same pattern over and over. Maybe it's a coincidence, but if one culture has a story about a flood, then they have a story. If two cultures have it, it could be a coincidence. But if you get 40 or 300, then maybe there's something to it. Maybe it really happened.
I mean, no archaeological evidence of anything.
I don't think we'll ever, maybe, but I don't think we'll find like skeletons of Nagas, right? If they found them, right? If they
How
found
would you
them,
be able to tell, right?
would that be revealed to the public? Like finding a giant skeleton, right? If you went 100 years ago in the US, do you know how many newspaper clippings are there that talk about giant skeletons found in the US?
No.
Oh, you don't know?
How many?
Oh my God, thousands. The newspaper clippings are like 100 years old.
Oh, okay.
So you could, if you typically look at like newspapers published 100 years ago, they're always publishing, oh, we found giant skeletons when they excavated this mound, right? All over. We're not talking about one state. We're not talking about one newspaper company. We're saying this is found. Yeah, look at that. 1919, 18 feet tall, Austin, Texas. You'll
June
find
14th.
them. You'll find them in Florida. You'll find them in California. You'll find them everywhere. Right? But where are they now? Why are they not found?
Right. Yeah. Why? Why do you think it's not talked about now?
What do you think will happen if they do talk about it now?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why?
If you're an archaeologist and you do find a giant skeleton, right, 10 feet tall, would you tell this to the world?
Hell yeah, I would.
You wouldn't. You would be out of that archaeology degree and your position in a week. But that's a real newspaper clipping that says 49 skeletons found. And you know who did the excavation? It was done by an archaeologist.
Really?
Yep, that's a real newspaper, man. If people say, "Oh, this is a hoax or it's fabricated," they can go, because I mentioned the date, I mentioned the newspaper. They can go there,
and you can find this.
Yep.
They sure are good at covering stuff up, man.
Well, I mean, this is a theory, right? Unless you want to say, "Oh,
is this video suppressed on YouTube?"
I don't think so. Usually, my videos won't come up unless you search for them. But you can see this is like 49 skeletons.
That's a lot.
That's a state archaeologist, right? I show this and I say, "Oh, this is G.S. Fisher."
As for giants is tricky because we don't have any hard evidence, but we have a lot of circumstantial evidence where the most recent would probably be late 19th century, early 20th, where you just have these discoveries all over America, over 1,000 of them. There's over 1,000 reports in newspapers of these findings. But the mainstream narrative is it was giants were cool at the time, and it was hoaxes, and it was just to make money. There's one giant story that's interesting because it overlaps several cultures. They have these Indian myths about these giants they're cannibals. So they're eating the people, and they're cannibals. So they're eating the people, and they get driven west by the tribes. They unite and drive them west into like Nevada and California at what's known as Lovelock Cave. An archaeologist goes in there and finds sandals that are like size 29 and these giant clothes. Like, I'm not making this part up. You can go see this. Like, why is there a sandal that's this size that are all found in the cave, and bones and red hair?
There was a man at least 12 to 15 feet in height. This is a monster. Red beard, then his hair was longish, past the shoulder, a scarlet red.
Every culture has giants, and the Bible, of course. Epic of Gilgamesh. So giants show up all through our culture. The story is always the same as this guy's, he's digging and it's like desecrating a Native American burial mound. Finds these giant bones, calls the Smithsonian. They come over, they investigate, they take the bones, they go back, and then it disappears. Like, that happens over and over through these stories, is the Smithsonian conspiracies always involved.
So are you saying the Smithsonian hides evidence of giants?
I'm saying that the conspiracy theory is that the Smithsonian hides evidence of a lot of things.
Of the same type of catastrophic flood, but one is a survival from the polytheist lens of the giants, which is how they say show up after the flood. But the Sumerian account also has traditions, just as the Epic of Gilgamesh has, of a second incursion, and many second incursions after the flood, because Gilgamesh is 6th generation after the flood. Now, People will say, but Gilgamesh is in the Enoch Book of Giants. That's true. It's very common for giants after the flood to be named after giants before the flood, right? So you could have two different giants, and that's not uncommon. That would be one sort of classic example. And so the details become a little bit different with the Epic of Gilgamesh flood story, and that there's 7 days, not 40 days, and there's differences like that. So, but again, understand that's a polytheist understanding, and they have some allegory within their stories, which is only known through the sort of the mystical understanding of the degrees that comes about as you go up the degrees in the mystical system and the secret society system. So we should not be upset that there's another story of survival and it's a giant story. We don't have to accept it as true. I would leave a crack open that's possible, because God said in Genesis 6 and 7, he was only going to destroy what he created, and he did not create the giants. Fallen angels did. So legally, if you wanted to get there, I much prefer a second incursion. But we don't have that smoking gun verse. I know people look at Genesis 6:4, and I tend to agree with the interpretation in this case, as opposed to the fact that when the sons of God go to the daughters of men and do so again, and as you take that back to the Hebrew in like manner, that means after the flood, but it could be more incursions after Mount Hermon before the flood, multiple before the flood, and it could also mean after the flood, or it could mean both, but we don't have a creation story of giants after the floods. We don't have a creation story of giants after the flood. So I leave that crack open.
We were speaking of the nation of Ad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran, and we sent Ad their brother Hud, alayhi salatu wasalam. The nation of Ad had come approximately 2,000 years before the coming of Isa alayhi salatu wasalam. And this nation lived in the land known as Hadramaut, nowadays between Oman and Yemen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had blessed this nation immensely. He had granted this nation such gifts and blessings that he had never given to nations before or after. He mentions within the Quran that the world has yet to see a creation like the creation of Ad. And the meaning of Ad is someone high, with someone tall stature, in a lofty position. This nation of Ad, they were very powerful people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks of their strength within the Quran, and how Hud alayhi salatu wasalam tries to awaken his people, his nation Ad, who has gone astray from the path of Allah, by reminding them of the blessings Allah has given to them. And remember how Allah made you khulafa, successors of the land, after the nation of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam was destroyed.
Well, because God said in Genesis 6 and 7, he was only going to destroy what he created, and he did not create the giants. Fallen angels did. So legally, if you wanted to get there, I much prefer a second incursion. But we don't have that smoking gun verse.
After the nation of Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam was destroyed, and how Allah increased you in physical form. He granted you physical strength. So remember the bounties, the ni'mah of Allah that Allah has granted upon you, so that you may be successful. But also the looks that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to the nation of Ad. The men were handsome and the women were beautiful. So this nation stood out above all other nations. To tell us how far they stood above, or how high they were in the creation of Allah, Allah simply mentions, I have not created a nation like them before. Slowly over time, shirk came into their lives, and through the use of their strength, they started to abuse the weak. They started to oppress the weak, the poor. And they started to do all forms of zulm upon the land. Hud alayhi salatu wasalam would constantly remind them, stop doing what you're doing. Stop oppressing the weak and the poor. Stop with this tyranny that you've spread all across the world. What was their response? They had gone so far ahead in their arrogance and in their confidence in their strength that they made a statement, loud and clear, to Hud alayhi salatu wasalam. Who is there that is more powerful than us in strength? Hold your strength back. What happened to the people before you? The nation of Nuh, they were destroyed. What happened to the people before you? The nation of Nuh, they were destroyed. You want to be destroyed as well? The nation of Nuh was destroyed by water, right? Which is a natural element. And the nation of Ad was also destroyed by a natural element. Wind, air, okay? So something so simple and small that the people had never even thought of. When they saw that there is a cloud fast approaching them, a dense cloud at a distance, a cloud which will bring us rain. بَلْ هُوَ مَسْتَعْجَلْتُمْ بِهِ. Hud alayhi salatu wasalam mentions, no, it's that which you are hastening towards. Adhab of Allah, that we sent upon them a screaming wind a screaming wind. The Mufassirin have mentioned that this wind was so powerful by nature itself. I don't need to mention the definition of it. Allah mentions in the Quran, تُدَمِّرُ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ بِأَمْرِ رَبِّهَا. Allah gave wind full permission, go and cause havoc. Go and cause destruction. So Allah is telling wind, you are free to do what you want. You're free to cause as much as destruction as you want. Go and wreck everything. تُدَمِّرُ, destroy everything. كُلَّ شَيْءٍ بِأَمْرِ رَبِّهَا. We already know how powerful a wind is, but when it's granted permission from Allah to go and cause destruction, you can imagine the amount of destruction the wind itself will have. Within was Adan al-Ula. This is the first Ad that the Quran speaks of. Next nation came of Thamud, and that nation is known as Adun al-Thaniya, the second Ad. Thamud was also a branch of this nation of Ad. And for Thamud, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent another prophet. Where did the nation of Thamud come from? They came from the very few survivors left of Ad after the Adab. That those who survived, those who believed in the oneness of Allah and who believed in Hud alayhi salatu wasalam being the messenger, from their children later came Thamud, the nation of Thamud. And Salih alayhi salatu wasalam was sent to that nation. Inshallah, as to his story, we'll start next time.
Can show up after the flood. Now, if we look at one more example, and this is really good for Christians to know as well, is that in the Greek story, we get the Greek quote unquote Noah, and his name is Deucalion, and his wife is Pyrrha. Actually get the wife's name in that account. And this is said to be the Greek version of the Noah story. And again, okay, sounds good, plausible, but then when you get into the details of it, it's not quite the same. So who is Deucalion? Well, he is the offspring of Prometheus. Who is Prometheus? Prometheus is a god, a fallen angel. So same story. Giant survival story, not a human survival story. So we can look at the polytheist accounts and take and glean information about the same event. We just need to understand the polytheist lens. So we have a historical account that cannot be dismissed through any sort of scientific sort of approach when you have that many witnesses and narratives that testify to it, and a warning to the future, which is common in all of those accounts. The details are just seen through the different cultural and polytheist or monotheist lenses. So I tend to look at, I put my faith in the story in the Bible, in Genesis, and I look at giants as being created, and I look at a similarity with that, but I rely on what's in the Bible, and whether the other ones are true or not doesn't really matter, but it's certainly possible that there would be records of that or an accounting of that through a different lens. So when we look at the flood, though, and even throughout the Bible, you have passages, whether it's in the Psalms or Job or Isaiah, of references that are part of the flood story and can be at no other part than at the flood story, that is talking about more than just water. And it's a conflagration of catastrophes. Again, that matches up with what is talked about in other accounts, that you had volcanoes, you have earthquakes. In the polytheist account, you even have the Pleiades coming in as from that star system or a meteorite, depending on how you want to interpret it, because again, of the allegory to honor their gods. You get three of these, I will call them asteroids or meteors, that hit the ocean floor that create this great flood and the other catastrophes that come with it. So in the Pleiades, it's talked about in that kind of manner in the Bible. So I'm not saying that the polytheist account is 100% accurate. What I'm saying is that we have a testimony within the Bible that suggests we need to look broader than just looking for just one flood evidence when you have multiple catastrophes. If we look around the earth, we have underwater cities like Dwarka all over the world, in the Southeast Asia and elsewhere. And how did they get there? Perhaps during the flood. So I think the flood story is something that we should have faith in, and it's God's intercession into humanity. And God does intercede at times, whether or not he permits other beings to do that for him or brings it himself. I leave that up to God. But it's an intercession because the whole earth was violent because of the giants. And this is common in all of the accounts. And the whole earth was corrupted, including all of the flesh. And so this is an intercession. Why is there an intercession? Because the Adamites were created as a resolution to the angelic rebellion. And the giants were created to ensure humankind didn't reach their destiny. And what's the destiny? To be raised up to be like angels in the future world. And our interrelationship indicts the fallen angels for the crimes that they do against us, and we're going to judge them in the future time for those crimes against humanity. And they use the giants so that to do their dirty work, so that the angels don't get blood on their hands. So that the angels don't get blood on their hands.
So, you have the story in the Bible about how the serpent offered knowledge to humanity in Eden. And the reason the humans were kicked out of the garden, where, by the way, they were workers, because the nakedness in antiquity was a sign of slave labor. And we were tillers of the field in Eden for the gods, except we didn't know it. We didn't know we were naked, meaning we didn't know we were slaves. And this God is threatened by our being given the discernment to recognize good versus evil, because that would mean we'd realize that our overlord is a bastard who wants to deny us knowledge. And what Adonai Elohim, the chief of the gods, says when he casts man out of Eden, or right before he does, is let us, basically exile them from the garden before they also eat of the tree of life and become like unto us, so that nothing becomes impossible to them, right? So this is a God who's jealous and afraid of humans achieving parity with the gods, with the Elohim. And there's this rebel who's symbolized by the serpent. Now, remember, the serpent is punished by having his legs removed. And then in the book of Revelation, Satan is referred to as the dragon, the great dragon, that serpent of old.
I got initiated into this cult of the dragon, this sons of serpent.
Nagas are also called sarpas. They're called sarpa.
Where does nagas come from?
Basically a word that denotes reptile, like a snake, like serpentine.
Okay.
Like you understand what I'm saying? Like it's called a sarpa in India. It's called a seraph in Israel. It's called a serpent. It's all coming from the same word. From in the Bible, it's all coming from the same word.
Right. Sleeper cell god.
Yeah. Which the Gnostics believed was the serpent in the Garden of Eden.
I got initiated into this cult of the dragon, this sons of serpent. Families that most Americans, Western civilization, modern, comfortable Christianity to get raised up in, have done away with all of these kind of old things we read about in the Bible about, people worshiping idols, people passing their children to the fires of Moloch. This stuff becomes this lost, distant memory that has no bearing on their modernity. And because of that, they don't look at the enemy as an actual living, breathing body. There is an actual body, a beast army that's being raised up day and night. And there is infinitely far more capable and intelligent warriors sitting on the front line of that, guardians, heraldically looking after custodians of bloodlines that they will sincerely believe have the right to rule mankind. And they believe that right comes from their seed. They believe that right comes from their mama and their dad, going back generationally. And because of that, they have been custodians of texts, of scripts, manuscripts, of embossing stones, museums. They have worked diligently to collect a repertoire of affiliations that can prove they are who they say they are, and they come from the fallen. They come from a bloodline that is not just entirely human. And they believe sincerely that because they are sons of their father, the devil, the dragons, that they are servants of them. And they are bound by mutual imprecation, by oaths, by the swearings of these disgusting solemn vows, that they have the right to rule mankind and will be given the right to rule mankind in perpetuity, that they can align themselves with the powers of the kingdom of darkness, not how they perceive themselves, but these celestial hosts, and that they can rule and reign on mankind. Our family, my family, has a various branching that has that seed line contained therein. That's not to say I'm of the preeminent bloodline that's out there, but I got initiated into this cult of the dragon, this sons of serpent. And that doesn't just come from the bloodline that came in my veins, but it also came through a ritual initiation where you're you're consuming the blood of others that have that in them. And you're literally taught to believe that this is a parasitic, a host. You become the host for this parasite, that this seed will live in you, and it will give you intelligence. It will give you power. It will give you wealth. It'll remove, I believe that it's really offering the removal of some of the effects of the curse that was initiated on mankind in the garden and on the dragon in the garden. And it's trying to mitigate both sides. We are parasitically given over to them so that they can mitigate the curse of crawling on their belly and eating dust all the days of their life. And we, in exchange, are being offered, hey, it won't be so hard to make money and eat and get food out of the ground and have childbirth. And there's this exchange offered to us that makes it so enticing.
In other words, Lucifer is explicitly identified with the serpent in Eden. Now, there's all kinds of people who want to argue against this because they want to save the Christian narrative in a Gnostic sense. And there are people who try to identify Jesus himself with Lucifer and so on and so forth. I used to teach comparative religion for a few years. And so there are all these nuances, but I think the evidence is there to make the case that the dragon from the book of Revelation is the serpent in Eden. And that's exactly the same figure as Quetzalcoatl, who's also represented as a feathered serpent, as a dragon, essentially. And that's the faction of Enki. And you see the symbol in Egypt, too, of, the serpents with wings coming out the sides of them, with the sun at the center, the symbol of the Shamasu Hor, the followers of Horus. So you have this through every human culture. And the narrative is essentially this, that we were created as workers or slaves or servants of some kind of celestial overlord, and we were put into a caste system, a hierarchy. The word hierarchy literally means holy order, hieros archy, a hierarchical pyramidal society of the kind you saw in ancient Egypt, of the kind that you see in the Varna system, the caste system of India, of the Hindu religion to this day. And at some point, there was a rebellion against this structure. I would say the most compelling version of the narrative of that rebellion is the one you find in Plato.